Hello, my name is Gary, and I was raised in the Western United States, so I'm a native English speaker. I hope that you will enjoy this YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us.
Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, 1828 to 1905. Chapter 19. Passepartout becomes too interested in his master, and what happens as a result. Hong Kong is an island that came under British control through the Treaty of Nanking after the War of 1842. The British built a major city and an excellent port there. The islands sit at the mouth of the Canton River, about 60 miles away from the Portuguese town of Macau on the opposite coast. Hong Kong has surpassed Macau in the competition for Chinese trade, and now most of the shipping of Chinese goods passes through Hong Kong. With its docks, hospitals, wharves, a Gothic cathedral, government buildings, and paved streets, Hong Kong looks like a town from Kent or Surrey magically transported to the other side of the world. Passepartout wandered with his hands in his pockets toward Victoria Harbour, taking in the sights of the unusual palanquins and other forms of transportation, as well as the mix of Chinese, Japanese, and European people passing by. At the harbor, he saw a chaotic array of ships from all nations, British, French, American, and Dutch warships and trading vessels, along with Japanese and Chinese junks, sampans, tankas, and flower boats that floated like garden beds on the water. When they reached the quay where they were supposed to board the Carnatic, Passepartout wasn't surprised to see Fix pacing back and forth. The detective looked both upset and frustrated. "This is bad news for the gentlemen of the Reform Club," Passepartout muttered to himself. He approached Fix with a cheerful smile, pretending not to notice the man's obvious distress. Fix, meanwhile, had every reason to be angry. The arrest warrant still hadn't arrived. It was on its way, but it wouldn't reach Hong Kong for several more days. And since this was the last British territory on Fogg's journey, the thief would get away unless Fix could somehow delay him. "Well, Monsieur Fix," Passepartout said, "have you decided to come with us all the way to America?" "Yes," Fix replied, through clenched teeth. "Good," Passepartout laughed heartily. "I knew you wouldn't be able to part ways with us. Come, let's book your cabin." They went into the steamer's office and reserved cabins for 4 people. As the clerk handed over their tickets, he informed them that the Carnatic's repairs had been completed, and the steamer would leave that very evening, not the next morning as previously scheduled. "That will suit my master even better," Passepartout said. "I will go and tell him." Fix decided to take a bold step. He resolved to tell Passepartout everything, thinking it might be the only way to keep Phileas Fogg in Hong Kong for a few more days. He invited Passepartout into a tavern he spotted along the quay. Inside, they found a large, well-decorated room. At one end was a big camp bed covered with cushions, where several people lay in a deep sleep. Around the room, about 30 customers were sitting at small tables, drinking English beer, gin, and brandy while smoking. They ordered 2 bottles of port, which the Frenchman enjoyed thoroughly, while Fix watched him closely. They chatted about the trip, and Passepartout was especially amused by the fact that Fix would be continuing the journey with them. However, once the bottles were empty, Passepartout stood up to go and inform his master about the change in the Carnatic's departure time. Fix grabbed him by the arm and said, "Wait a moment." "For what, Mr. Fix?" "I need to have a serious talk with you." "A serious talk?" exclaimed Passepartout, finishing the last bit of wine in his glass. "Well, we can talk about it tomorrow. I don't have time right now." "Hold on. What I have to say involves your master." At this, Passepartout looked closely at Fix, noticing a strange expression in his face. He sat back down. "What is it you want to say?" Fix placed his hand on Passepartout's arm, lowered his voice, and said, "You've figured out who I am, haven't you?" "Of course," said Passepartout, smiling. "Then I'm going to tell you everything." "I already know everything, my friend." "That's great, but go on, go on." "First, though, let me tell you that those gentlemen are wasting their money." "Wasting it?" Fix replied. "You sound perfectly confident. You clearly don't know how much money is involved." "Sure I do," Passepartout said. £20,000. 55,000, Fix corrected, squeezing Passepartout's hand. "What?" shouted the Frenchman. "Has Monsieur Fogg really risked 55,000 pounds? Well, that's all the more reason not to waste a second," he said, jumping up quickly. Fix pushed him back into a seat and continued, 55,000 pounds. And if I succeed, I get 2,000. If you help me, I give you 500. Help you, Passepartout said, his eyes wide with surprise. Yes, help me to keep Mr. Fogg here for 2 or 3 days. What are you saying? Not only are those men following my master and questioning his honor, now they want to put obstacles in his way. I'm ashamed for them. What do you mean? I mean it's a dirty trick. They might as well rob Mr. Fogg and take his money for themselves. That's exactly what we plan to do. It's a conspiracy then, cried Passepartout, getting more and more worked up as the alcohol affected him. A real conspiracy, and from so-called gentlemen? Fix started to look confused. Members of the Reform Club, Passepartout continued, you should know, Monsieur Fix, that my master is an honest man, and when he makes a bet, he plays fair. But who do you think I am? Fix asked, looking at him intently. Obviously, you're an agent sent by the members of the Reform Club to stop my master's journey. I've known for a while, but I've made sure not to say anything to Mr. Fogg. He doesn't know anything? Nothing, replied Passepartout, finishing his glass once again. Fix wiped his forehead, hesitating. What should he do? Passepartout's misunderstanding seemed genuine, but it complicated things. It was now clear that the servant wasn't his master's accomplice, as Fix had originally suspected. Well, the detective thought to himself, since he's not an accomplice, he might actually help me. There was no time to waste. Fogg had to be delayed in Hong Kong, so Fix decided to come clean. Listen to me, Fix said suddenly. I'm not, as you think, an agent of the Reform Club. Bah, scoffed Passepartout with a mocking grin. I'm a police detective sent here by Scotland Yard. You, a detective? I can prove it. Here's my commission. Passepartout was stunned when Fix showed him the document, which was clearly authentic. Mr. Fogg's bet, Fix continued, is just a cover. You and the gentlemen of the Reform Club are being fooled. He's drawn you into this without you even knowing. But why? Asked Passepartout. Listen, on the 28th of September, 55,000 pounds were stolen from the Bank of England by someone whose description matches Mr. Phileas Fogg. That's ridiculous, cried Passepartout, slamming his fist on the table. My master is the most honorable man I know. How do you know? You barely know anything about him. You started working for him the very day he left, and he left without luggage, carrying a large amount of banknotes. Yet you insist he's an honest man. Yes, yes, the poor man repeated, almost mechanically. Do you want to be arrested as his accomplice? Passepartout, overwhelmed by what he had just heard, buried his head in his hands and didn't dare to look at the detective. Phileas Fogg, the rescuer of Aouda, a brave and generous man, a thief? And yet there were so many signs pointing to it. Passepartout struggled to shake off the suspicions creeping into his mind. He didn't want to believe his master could be guilty. Well, what do you want from me? He finally asked, forcing the words out. Look, Fix replied, I've tracked Mr. Fogg here, but I still haven't received the arrest warrant I requested from London. You need to help me keep him here in Hong Kong. Me? But I'll share the 2,000 pounds reward from the Bank of England with you. Never, shouted Passepartout, trying to stand, but collapsing back into his chair, mentally and physically drained. Mr. Fix, he stammered, even if what you say is true, if my master really is the thief you're after, which I don't believe, I've seen his kindness and generosity. I won't betray him, not for all the money in the world. I come from a place where we don't do that sort of thing. You're refusing? I refuse. All right, let's pretend this conversation never happened, Fix said, trying to lighten the mood. Let's have a drink. Yes, let's drink, Passepartout mumbled, feeling himself slipping deeper under the effects of the alcohol. Fix, realizing that he needed to keep Passepartout away from his master at any cost, noticed a few opium pipes on the table. He slipped one into Passepartout's hand. The Frenchman took it, put it to his lips, lit it, and after taking several puffs, his head grew heavy and he slumped onto the table. Finally, Fix muttered, watching Passepartout pass out. Now, Mr. Fogg won't be warned about the Carnatic leaving, and if he finds out, he'll have to leave without this troublesome Frenchman. Fix paid the bill and left the tavern.
Chapter 20. Fix meets Phileas Fogg face to face. While these events were unfolding at the tavern, Mr. Fogg, unaware of the risk of missing the steamer, was calmly showing Aouda around the streets of the English quarter, purchasing what was needed for their upcoming journey. For a man like Mr. Fogg, traveling the world with just a small bag was fine, but it wasn't realistic to expect a woman to travel comfortably under such conditions. He handled this task with his usual calmness and always responded to Aouda's concerns, which left her amazed by his patience and kindness by simply saying, "It's all part of my journey, a part of my plan." After they finished their shopping, they returned to the hotel and enjoyed a lavish dinner at the shared dining table. Aouda then shook hands with Mr. Fogg, as was the English custom, and went to her room to rest. Mr. Fogg spent the rest of the evening reading the Times and the Illustrated London News. If he could be surprised by anything, it would have been the fact that his servant didn't return by bedtime. But knowing that the steamer to Yokohama wasn't leaving until the next morning, he didn't worry. When Passepartout didn't show up the following morning to answer his bell, Mr. Fogg, still unfazed, simply grabbed his bag, called for Aouda, and ordered a palanquin. It was 8 o'clock, and at 9:30, during high tide, the Carnatic was scheduled to leave the harbor. Mr. Fogg and Aouda got into the palanquin, with their luggage following on a wheelbarrow. Half an hour later, they arrived at the quay, where they planned to board. However, Mr. Fogg learned that the Carnatic had departed the evening before. He had expected to find not only the steamer, but also his servant, and was forced to give up on both. Yet, no sign of disappointment showed on his face as he calmly remarked to Aouda, "It's just an accident, nothing more." At that moment, a man who had been watching him closely stepped forward. It was Fix, who bowed and addressed Mr. Fogg. "Weren't you, like me, a passenger on the Rangoon, which arrived yesterday?" "I was," replied Mr. Fogg coolly, "but I don't believe we've met." "Apologies. I thought I might find your servant here." "Do you know where he is?" Aouda asked anxiously. "What?" Fix responded, pretending to be surprised. "Is he not with you?" "No," Aouda said. "He hasn't appeared since yesterday. Could he have boarded the Carnatic without us?" "Without you, madam," Fix replied. "Excuse me, but did you intend to sail on the Carnatic?" "Yes," Aouda answered. "So did I, madam, and I am quite disappointed. The Carnatic, having finished its repairs, left Hong Kong 12 hours ahead of schedule, with no notice. Now we'll have to wait a week for the next steamer." When Fix mentioned a week, he felt his heart leap with joy. Fogg stuck in Hong Kong for a week? That would give plenty of time for the warrant to arrive, and finally, luck seemed to be on his side. But his relief turned to horror when he heard Mr. Fogg calmly say, "But surely there are other ships in the Hong Kong harbor besides the Carnatic." Offering his arm to Aouda, Fogg headed toward the docks in search of another vessel ready to depart. Stunned, Fix followed, as if an invisible thread bound him to Mr. Fogg. The luck that had favored Fogg so far seemed to have run out. For 3 hours, Phileas Fogg wandered the docks, determined to find a ship, even if he had to charter one himself to reach Yokohama. But every vessel he found was either loading or unloading cargo and unable to leave. Fix began to regain hope. Yet Mr. Fogg, undeterred, continued his search, even considering going to Macau if necessary. At that moment, a sailor approached him on the docks. "Are you looking for a boat, sir?" the sailor asked. "Do you have one ready to sail?" Fogg replied. "Yes, sir, a pilot boat, number 43, the best in the harbor." "Is it fast?" "She sails between 8 and 9 knots per hour. Would you like to see her?" Yes. You'll be satisfied with her, sir. Are you planning a short trip? No, a voyage. A voyage? The sailor repeated, surprised. Yes. Will you agree to take me to Yokohama? The sailor leaned on the railing, his eyes widening. Are you serious, sir? Yes. I missed the Carnatic, and I need to reach Yokohama by the 14th at the latest to catch the ship to San Francisco. I'm sorry, but that's impossible. I'll pay you £100 a day, with an extra £200 if we reach Yokohama on time. Are you serious? The sailor asked again. Very much so, Fogg replied. The pilot stepped away, gazing out at the sea, clearly torn between the temptation of a large sum of money and the fear of such a long journey. Fix was in agony, waiting for the decision. Mr. Fogg turned to Aouda. You wouldn't be afraid, would you? Not with you, Mr. Fogg, she replied. The pilot returned, nervously twisting his hat in his hands. Well, pilot? Mr. Fogg asked. Well, sir, the pilot replied, I couldn't risk myself, my crew, or my small boat of barely 20 tons on such a long voyage at this time of year. Besides, we wouldn't reach Yokohama in time. It's 1,660 miles from Hong Kong. Only 1,600, Mr. Fogg corrected. It's the same difference. Fix began to breathe easier. But, the pilot added, there might be another way. Fix held his breath. How? Asked Mr. Fogg. By going to Nagasaki, at the southern tip of Japan, or even to Shanghai, which is only 800 miles from here. Pilot, Mr. Fogg said firmly, I need to catch the American steamer to Yokohama, not Shanghai or Nagasaki. Why not? Replied the pilot. The San Francisco steamer doesn't leave from Yokohama. It stops there and at Nagasaki, but it departs from Shanghai. Are you certain? Absolutely. And when does the ship leave Shanghai? On the 11th, at 7 in the evening. That gives us 4 days, 96 hours, and with good luck, a southwest wind and calm seas, we could make the 800 miles to Shanghai. And you could be ready to go? In an hour, as soon as we get provisions on board and raise the sails. It's a deal. Are you the captain? Yes, John Bunsby, captain of the Tankadere. Do you want some money in advance? If it's not too much trouble. Here are £200 as a deposit, said Mr. Fogg. Turning to Fix, he added, if you'd like to join us? Thank you, sir. I was about to ask. Very well. We'll board in half an hour. But what about poor Passepartout? Aouda asked, visibly worried about the missing servant. I'll do everything I can to find him, Mr. Fogg reassured her. While Fix hurried to the pilot boat, still jittery, Mr. Fogg and Aouda headed to the police station in Hong Kong. There, Mr. Fogg gave a description of Passepartout and left money for the search. Afterward, they stopped at the hotel to retrieve their luggage, which had been sent back, and returned to the wharf. It was now 3 o'clock, and pilot boat number 43, with its crew on board and provisions stored, was ready to set sail. The Tankadere was a sleek little craft of 20 tons, as elegantly built as a racing yacht. Her polished copper sheathing, galvanized ironwork, and ivory-white deck reflected the care and pride John Bunsby took in keeping her in top condition. Her speed was not just a promise. She had already proven it by winning several pilot boat races. The crew consisted of John Bunsby, the captain, and 4 tough sailors who knew the Chinese seas well. Bunsby himself, around 45, was vigorous, sunburnt, with sharp eyes and an energetic, confident demeanor that could reassure even the most nervous of passengers. Phileas Fogg and Aouda boarded the Tankadere, where they found Fix already settled in. Below deck was a small, neat cabin with walls that curved to form cots above a round divan. In the center, there was a table with a hanging lamp. The space was tight, but tidy. "I'm sorry I don't have better accommodations for you," Mr. Fogg said to Fix, who nodded without saying a word. The detective felt a sense of humiliation for having to accept Mr. Fogg's hospitality. Rogue as he may be, Fix thought, he's certainly a polite one. At 10 minutes past 3, the sails were raised, along with the English flag. Mr. Fogg and Aouda, seated on deck, took one last look at the quay, hoping to spot Passepartout. Fix, however, was anxious that Passepartout, whom he had wronged, might show up, which would force a very uncomfortable conversation. But there was no sign of the Frenchman. He was likely still under the effects of the opium. Finally, Captain John Bunsby gave the order to set sail. The Tankadere, catching the wind, sped gracefully over the waves.